Warning, this podcast contains content that may be alarming, disturbing, or shocking to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. According to National Crime Information Center, over 600,000 Americans get reported missing every year. Over 85,000 stay that way. The FBI says there's over 25 to 50 active serial killers in America at any time. Yes, we truly do live in a land of monsters. These are some of their stories. Welcome to Among Monsters, a true crime podcast, brought to you by Jeremy Hansen. Welcome to Among Monsters, podcast number 4. Today I want to talk about a weird case involving 19-year-old Cami Broetzmann from Janesville, Wisconsin, who was attacked by Asher Spitz on October 19th, 2022. You see, Cami was an in-home caregiver and came to Peter Spitz, Asher's father's home, in order to give him care. What's weird about this story is we have to go back 20 years or almost 20 years for you to understand what's going on. That night, Cami Broetzmann faced the fight of her life. She literally went into a horrific nightmare and ended up fighting for her life. It starts out, Asher's mother had mental health issues. And I'm going to read this story from Colorado because this is where it happened, from 2011, that talks about what happened in 2004. Peter Spitz, Asher's mother, former Colorado Marine, shot and blinded by his ex-wife, regains custody of his son after years of struggle. The father and son reunited after years of heartbreaking struggle. So Peter Spitz, a former Marine from Englewood, Colorado, who was shot in the face and blinded by his wife, Teresa Lynn, has finally been reunited with his 7-year-old son after a controversial custody ruling that separated them after the original shooting took place and gave visitation rights to his wife. According to the Denver Post, Spitz's son Asher had been under the guardianship of his now ex-wife's aunt and uncle since the shooting. But an Arapahoe County judge recently ended that agreement when it was discovered that the guardians were allowing overnight visits from Spitz's ex-wife, Lynn. Back in May of 2004, Lynn took a 10-month-old Asher to her sister's home in Aurora in the middle of the night, according to 7 News. Upon returning to her home, she proceeded to shoot her husband in the face 3 times. Lynn then went to his mother, Mariko Shida, who had been staying with the couple, and shot her in the back of the head, killing her instantly. Shockingly, after the shootings, Lynn then drove herself to the police station and turned herself in, still holding the revolver. Westward reports that Spitz then awoke in the hospital to discover what had just happened. He had survived the vicious attack, but was now blind. His mother was dead, his wife was in jail, and his son was in the care of his wife's sister's family, Donald and Sheila Reynolds. During the trial that followed, Spitz remarkably testified on his wife's behalf. He took the witness stand saying that she could not have possibly known what she was doing, according to fathers and families, which aided in his wife being acquitted by reason of insanity and committed to the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo, rather than prison, where she remains to this day. Now remember, this was 2011. And stranger still, once Asher was living with the Reynolds, his mother got court-ordered visitation rights with her son while she was in the mental hospital. Now keep in mind, this story doesn't go into it, but in her confession, before she shot her husband 3 times in the face and her mother-in-law once in the back of the head, for a couple months, she said she had thought about taking young Asher and drowning him in the bathtub. But Peter Spitz faced an uphill battle to get his son back after he recovered and while being blind. Once Spitz had regained his health, Donald and Sheila Reynolds refused to give up rights to Spitz's son and started the process to adopt him, according to CBS 5 reports. The court was then considering an appeal from Reynolds of the court's decision to give Spitz full custody of his son, and Spitz's ex-wife Lynn has defended the rights of the Reynolds, which, keep in mind, is her sister, to continue to raise her son, saying it's the only familiar family he's ever known. To the Associated Press Denver Post, she reported that too, and has not come to the aid of her ex-husband Spitz in his custody battle. Now that Spitz has full custody of his son, thanks in great part to the aid and efforts of Fathers and Families, an advocacy group that fights for the rights of children to have both a mother and a father in their lives after a divorce, who advised Mr. Spitz and helped him obtain legal counsel during the trial. So this woman was facing life in prison. Asher's mother, Teresa Lynn Spitz. She had had mental health problems in the past. She got married to a Marine. It was a hot and heavy romance. They had this child. She started going through mental delusions and literally thought about drowning her son, and came home, shot her husband in the face 3 times, shot her mother-in-law, his mom, in the back of the head once, killed him, drove to the police station, went in there, admitted to what she did. She went in front of the court, and the court said she was not guilty by reason of insanity. She was then sent to Pueblo, to the mental health facility in Colorado, but she wouldn't stay there long. Listen to this. Peter Spitz and Teresa Lynn. Judge orders killer's release despite blind victim's fears. So Peter Spitz was scared of his ex-wife because he knew what was going on. He knew what she had already done, and he didn't think that there was enough time that it went by or she received enough therapy to get better. This is less than 7 years after Teresa Lynn shot her husband in the face as he slept, killed her mother-in-law, and considered drowning her 8-month-old son. An Arapahoe County judge has ordered her release from the state hospital, starting with unsupervised off-grounds trips and eventually leading to community placement. The decision came despite strong opposition to the move by Peter Spitz, who was blinded but survived his former wife's rampage. As he recounted in a December story of Blindsided, Spitz testified in his wife's defense at a murder trial, which resulted in a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. He still maintains it was the right thing to do, that Teresa doesn't deserve to be in prison for life because of her mental illness. But he's troubled by the conflicting diagnoses doctors have made concerning her mental state, and he supposedly swift turnaround she's made in treatment at the Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo. Last week, Spitz spoke out at the hearing held in Judge Michael Spear's courtroom to consider her doctor's request that she be granted full temporary physical removal to advance her treatment plan. If the doctors are wrong about his ex's progress, he noted they will risk eggs on their face. And if Lynn is still subject to violent delusions, he added, I risk getting brains on my face. But Judge Spear overruled prosecutors' objections to Lynn's release and discounted secondhand reports of a letter she allegedly wrote from jail several years ago, vowing to finish the job on her husband and son. The recipient of that letter has denied it contained any threats, while another party who once had possession of the document told Westward it was quite explicit in that she said she wants Peter dead, and it was that simple. Since neither side could produce the actual letter in court, Judge Spear relied extensively on the testimony of Lynn's doctors at the CMHIP, who praised her conduct and stated that her treatment now required greater freedom, even though opinion among some experts was divided about the nature of her mental illness and whether she even should have a chance to have been found not guilty by reason of insanity in the first place. But the lack of a coherent explanation for the psychotic break that caused Lynn to attack her family members meant little now. Once a defendant is found NGRI, the accused becomes a patient and not a criminal, and there's an expectation that that treatment will fix things. The court said they understood Mr. Spitz concerns for personal safety and the safety of his child, Spear wrote in his decision. But the court cannot ignore the premise of Colorado's system of treatment when an individual is found not guilty by the reason of insanity. The court believes that the supervision the state hospital will apply will be for both the treatment and of the defendant, the protection ordered, and this public hearing includes this, Mr. Spitz. Ironically, at present, Lynn has more access to the couple's young son than Spitz does. The boy was placed in the care of guardians in the wake of the shooting, remember, her sister, and Spitz has had conflicts with them over his son's care, while Lynn, a longtime friend of the couple, has been permitted regular supervised visits. Spitz worries about the increase in those visits that will result from Spear's order, which will allow Lynn to come to Denver on 3-day passes and eventually live and work away from the hospital. I believe Teresa still poses a great threat to me and my son, he says. I just don't see this story having a happy ending. So we've got this family that has a family member, a wife and a mother that has mental health issues. The court at that time has decided now that she should have visitation 3 days a week at her sister's. He's having a hard time as a military veteran, a Marine that's now blind. He's having a hard time getting custody of his son back because of him being blind. This is 2011. Eventually, he gets his son back and they move to Wisconsin. This is where the story gets weird. They come there. He's got his son with him, which by all accounts, his son was completely normal. He has a in-care worker, which happens to be Cami Broetzmann, and life is good. Life is great for them. As a matter of fact, Cami at the time had been his caregiver for 6 months. On the night of October 19th, 2022, she goes over there for a regular day, things that she has done for 6 months, coming over there, cleaning up the house a little bit, making sure that he's able to take his meds, making sure that he has something to eat, doing everything that she can to make him comfortable while living there with his son, Asher. Forward to October, we read from WKOW 27. 19-year-old Janesville stabbing suspect says that he heard voices telling him to kill. A criminal complaint states voices are what led a 19-year-old man from Janesville to stab his father's caretaker, causing significant injury. Asher Spitz was charged with attempted first-degree intentional homicide on Friday. 27 News has previously identified the victim, Cami Broetzmann, as a caretaker to Spitz's father, who is blind according to a criminal complaint filed in Rock County. The charging document further outlines what happened before the stabbing and the injuries Broetzmann sustained. According to the criminal complaint, Spitz, that's Asher Spitz, lured Broetzmann to the basement where his bedroom is while his father was sleeping. The complaint states that Spitz told Broetzmann he needed help with the laundry and she needed to help him figure out the washer. While Cami Broetzmann was looking at the washing machine, she told police that Spitz was behind her and out of the blue said, "I'm sorry, but you have to die." The complaint states he then proceeded to stab her twice in the back with a 10 to 12-inch long knife before she turned around and started fighting back. Broetzmann was able to get free herself after a struggle with Spitz and ran out of the house and into her car while trying to drive away. She had lost so much blood, she first drove into the house after reversing and was approached by neighbors who happened to be a local Janesville, Wisconsin school teacher and asked her if she needed help. Most of the people at the time didn't even know she was bleeding from her back because she was in the car, but she had received multiple stab wounds, 5 of them very serious. She also had cuts all over her hands and face from trying to protect herself from getting cut by the knife. When interviewed by police, Spitz said he began to hear voices while playing video games on the night of the attack. He told authorities those voices were telling him to kill someone. This is literally a nightmare. He said that he would go into his room on other nights and tell himself, I need to get these to quit. And on other nights, for some reason, the voices would go away. This night was completely different. This night, he would actually carry out his attack, and nobody for sure knows why. Now, in this time, her mother decided to write something. This is Cami Broetzmann's mother. And this gives a little bit more detail of the attack than this story told us. Her mother says on Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, Cami was at work, the same place she had been since June. She has provided in-home care to the elderly and disabled population in their homes, and she absolutely loves her job. On this night, she was in the home of one of her many patients, a home that she is at several times per week and has been since late June, early July, doing her typical stuff like preparing dinner, light housework, etc. The client has a son that is also Cami's age who lives in the home but is not part of Cami's job. However, just out of pure humanity, they interact from time to time, but it is certainly not Cami's focus while there. She has never spoken of fear or concern about going into this home and has often noted that this client is someone she just adores. For reasons that we will likely never know or understand, the son lured Cami to the basement of the home where he proceeded to viciously attack her and told her that she was going to have to die. He proceeded to stab her several times, approximately 7 wounds. She had 3 stab wounds to her back, one that punctured her lung. There are 2 stab wounds to her right breast. Her left arm was significantly cut, with a wound starting below her wrist all the way to the elbow. We are still assessing the damage here. The surgeon indicated significant muscle bleeding, tearing, and cutting. There are more severe wounds. In the ER, immediate needs were addressed, including a chest tube for the lung, and she did have to receive some blood. She was then taken in emergency surgery to assess internal damage. Surgery lasted from 4 to 5 hours, and she was taken to the ICU, sedated, and put on a breathing machine post-surgery. I was not allowed to see her when I arrived at the hospital, as she was considered a crime scene, so all I could do was wait. My support system that showed up at the hospital was second to none. I was able to see her briefly after surgery. She did open her eyes and look at me, but there was nothing else. Thursday morning, I received a call that Cami was alert and insistent that her breathing tube be removed. They did this, and that is a good thing, as the best thing for the body is to do what it does. She asked nursing staff if she was going to be okay, where was her mom, and when she could speak to police. Needless to say, I stepped up my pace and got out of the house. Luckily, we only live about 2 minutes away from the hospital. When we arrived, Cami was surprisingly alert and chatty, and it was a bit surreal given the ordeal. Shock and anesthesia does amazing things. She was adamant about speaking to the police, so the detective came immediately, one that I have worked with from way back, and we started assessing damage from there. The surgeon indicated significant muscle bleeding. Based on movement, it looks like tendons are likely intact, but there is nerve damage to assess at a later time. There are several superficial defensive wounds to both hands, but her left hand is the most significant, with several fingers being cut where she grabbed the blade of the knife and he pulled the knife out of her grasp to the bone. The most significant stab wound was to the right portion of her abdomen. This stab went completely through her liver, damaged the gallbladder to the extent it was removed, cut the duodenum, as well as the bowel. When I was originally contacted, I was told she had been cut on the arm, and that was all the reporter had for me at the time. We later learned that those who rendered aid to her on scene only saw the cut on the arm and were not aware that she had so many other more severe wounds. In the ER, immediate needs were addressed, including a chest tube for the lung, and she did receive some blood. She was then taken to the emergency room to assess all internal damages. Now, the hell that Cami Broetzmann went through is almost identical to what happened to his father. And it's kind of scary in a way to see how these things are working out. Asher Spitz has been in front of a judge in Janesville, Wisconsin, in Rock County. And that judge has now ordered doctors to tell them whether or not he can stand trial and if he is mentally insane. If he's proven mentally insane, he will likely do almost exactly what his mother did 19 years before. Cami Broetzmann is on Facebook, and they do have some things if you want to help her out with the healing and things that are going on. This just happened October 19th of 2022. I wish her the best. I hope that they do the right thing with Asher Spitz. Peter Spitz hasn't said very much about what's going on here, but I think that we need to take a good look at about these monsters that sometimes we don't follow because we're just being too nice, because we don't want to offend anybody. Maybe we should look into the previous history of the families and what's going on to avoid something like 19-year-old Cami Broetzmann going to 1020 North Osborne Avenue in Janesville, Wisconsin to do her caregiving job and almost lose her life. That's the show for today, folks. I hope you loved it. Remember, go over to Spreaker, Among Monsters podcast.